When they gunned down Angela Cross during a routine traffic stop, the corrupt officers of Oak Ridge thought they were silencing a troublesome school teacher. They never asked who her husband was. Elijah Cross doesn't just know how to kill, he trained America's most elite soldiers to hunt and eliminate high-value targets. For 15 years, he channeled those lethal skills into community service. Until now. As Oak Ridge's powerful sheriff watches his criminal empire crumble, as evidence surfaces and allies vanish, one chilling realization spreads through corrupt ranks. They aren't dealing with a grieving widower. They've awakened a ghost from America's darkest operations, a man who dismantles criminal organizations with surgical precision, and he's saved them for last. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The gym of the Oak Ridge Community Center echoed with the rhythmic sound of fists striking canvas. Elijah Cross stood behind a punching bag, his broad shoulders and solid stance, holding it steady as 16-year-old Marcus Taylor unleashed a series of jabs. Sweat glistened on the boy's dark skin, his face a mask of concentration. Control your breathing, Marcus. Power comes from discipline, not anger. Elijah's voice was calm, but carried the natural authority of someone who had commanded elite soldiers. At 45, his close-cropped hair showed touches of gray at the temples, but his physique remained that of a man who never stopped training. Marcus stepped back, breathing hard. I don't get it, Mr. Cross. When those guys jumped Tyler last week, I should have fought back harder. Elijah placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Fighting without strategy is just violence. Violence without purpose solves nothing. But you were in the military, Marcus persisted. You fought people. I did. Elijah's dark eyes grew distant for a moment. And that's exactly why I'm telling you there are better ways. He gestured toward the punching bag. This isn't about teaching you to hurt others. It's about discipline, focus, and knowing when to fight and when to walk away. The doors to the gym swung open and Angela Cross walked in. At 43, she moved with the grace and confidence of a woman comfortable in her own skin. Her warm, brown complexion glowed under the fluorescent lights, and her curly hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. A few teenagers trailed behind her carrying art supplies. Looks like you two are working hard, she said, her smile lighting up her face when she caught Elijah's eye. Ms. Cross. Marcus's demeanor immediately brightened. I got a B+ on that history test. I knew you could do it, Angela beamed at him. See what happens when you apply yourself? Elijah watched his wife with quiet admiration. This was her gift, seeing potential in people that they couldn't see in themselves. As an English teacher at Oak Ridge High School for 15 years, she had become a cornerstone of the community, turning around troubled students that other teachers had given up on. We should wrap up, Elijah said, checking his watch. The art group needs the space. As Marcus gathered his things, Angela approached Elijah, lowering her voice. Something happened at school today. The subtle tension in her voice immediately put Elijah on alert. Everything okay? I caught Chase Alderman selling pills behind the gym during lunch period. Her expression hardened. Not his first offense, but somehow the administration keeps giving him passes. Elijah frowned. Chase Alderman was the son of Martin Alderman, the wealthiest businessman in Oak Ridge. Martin owned half the commercial real estate in town and had his fingers in every political pie. His son had a reputation for trouble, but seemed to float above consequences. What happened when you reported it? Elijah asked, though he suspected the answer. Principal Wilson said he'd look into it, which means nothing will happen. Angela's frustration was evident. I confronted Chase directly after school, told him I wouldn't look the other way next time. Elijah's brow furrowed. How did he react? Like they all do when they've never faced real consequences, he smirked. Angela shook her head. Told me I should be careful who I mess with in this town. That sounds like a threat, Elijah said, his voice dropping an octave. I've dealt with entitled kids before, Angela replied, though concern flickered in her eyes. He's just a bully used to getting his way. Elijah nodded, but something cold settled in his stomach. In his former life as a Delta Force commander, he'd developed an instinct for approaching danger. Something about Chase's warning didn't sit right with him. Across town, Chase Alderman slouched in the leather chair in his father's home office, his handsome features twisted in a scowl. She thinks she can just embarrass me like that? In front of everyone? Chase's voice cracked with anger. At 18, he still carried the volatile emotions of adolescence, made worse by years of indulgence and lack of boundaries. Martin Alderman barely looked up from his computer screen. At 57, he had the polished appearance of old money, though everyone in town knew he'd built his empire through questionable real estate deals and political connections. It's a teacher's job to discipline students, Chase, Martin replied, dismissively. If you don't want trouble, don't sell pills on school property. It's bad for business. Chase leaned forward. She threatened to get me expelled. Do you know what that would do to my college applications? This caught Martin's attention. Despite his son's shortcomings, he had plans for him. Harvard, connections, eventually taking over the family business. Scandal was not part of that plan. Who? Is this teacher again? Angela Cross, Chase spat. Acts all high and mighty, like she runs the place. Martin's eyes narrowed slightly. Cross? The wife of that ex-military guy? Yeah, the one who runs those stupid mentoring programs at the community center. Chase rolled his eyes. Thinks he's some kind of hero. Martin leaned back in his chair, considering. The Crosses were well respected in the community, particularly in the predominantly black east side of town. Angela's work with underprivileged students and Elijah's mentoring of at-risk youth had earned them goodwill that even Martin's money couldn't buy. They represented a type of influence he couldn't control, moral authority. Let me make a call, Martin said finally, reaching for his phone. Sheriff Bill Dalton's office was a shrine to his 25 years in law enforcement. Plaques, commendations, and photos with politicians lined the walls. At 59, with a paunch that strained his uniform and a perpetual redness to his face, he looked like the stereotype of a small-town sheriff, which served him well. People underestimated him. When his phone rang, and Martin Alderman's name flashed on the screen, he answered immediately. Martin, what can I do for you? His voice was genial, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. As he listened to Martin's complaint about Angela Cross, Dalton's expression darkened. I know exactly who you're talking about. Her husband's been a thorn in my side for years, running those outreach programs, filling kids' heads with ideas about community policing and civilian oversight. Martin's voice came through the speaker, smooth and measured. It seems we might have a mutual problem then. Might be, Dalton agreed. I'll have Reed keep an eye on them, see if they step out of line. After hanging up, Dalton summoned Officer James Reed to his office. Reed was 34, ambitious, and willing to bend rules when necessary, qualities Dalton valued in his inner circle. I need you to watch the Crosses, Dalton instructed. Angela and Elijah. Find something we can use. Reed nodded. Angela teaches my nephew, always talking about systemic issues and community empowerment, like we're not doing our jobs. People like them are dangerous, Dalton said. They give folks ideas about challenging authority, make them think they can change things. He leaned forward. Just find a reason to bring them down a peg. Yes, sir, Reed replied, already thinking of ways to apply pressure. That evening, Elijah and Angela sat on their back porch, enjoying the mild spring air. Their modest home in East Oak Ridge wasn't fancy, but the yard was well kept, and Angela's flower gardens added splashes of color. I can't stop thinking about that confrontation with Chase, Angela admitted, cradling a cup of tea between her hands. Maybe I shouldn't have been so direct. Elijah reached over and took her hand. You did exactly what you should have done. That kid needs boundaries before he hurts someone. I know, but his father has a lot of influence in this town. People like Martin Alderman and his spoiled son only have power when we give it to them, Elijah said firmly. Bullies fold when exposed to light. I've seen it everywhere from schoolyards to war zones. Angela smiled, squeezing his hand. My warrior philosopher. Elijah chuckled. Former warrior. Current philosopher. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 15 years of marriage having given them the ability to communicate without words. Elijah studied his wife's profile in the fading light, still amazed that she had chosen him, with all his darkness and scars, both visible and hidden. "You know what tomorrow is?" Angela asked, breaking the silence. "Our anniversary, 16 years. Elijah smiled. "Don't worry, I haven't forgotten." "Where are you taking me?" "It's a surprise." Angela leaned her head against his shoulder. "Remember, our first date? That terrible Italian restaurant where the waiter spilled spaghetti all over your lap?" Elijah laughed. "I was so nervous I didn't even care. I was just worried you'd never agree to a second date." "Best decision I ever made," Angela murmured. They didn't know that across town, a plan was already in motion that would shatter their peaceful life. The next evening, Elijah and Angela drove home from Antonio's, the upscale Italian restaurant that had become their tradition for anniversary dinners. Angela wore a deep blue dress that complemented her skin tone, and Elijah had put on the suit she'd bought him last Christmas. 16 years, Angela mused, gazing out the window at the starlit sky. "Sometimes it feels like we just met, and other times I can't remember life before you." Elijah took his eyes off the road for a moment to look at her. "Best 16 years of my life." The road was dark, winding through a wooded area between the restaurant and their neighborhood. Elijah noticed headlights in his rearview mirror, coming up fast behind them. "Someone's in a hurry," he commented, moving slightly to the right to let them pass. Instead of passing, the vehicle, now identifiable as a police cruiser, flashed its lights. "Were you speeding?" Angela asked, surprised. "No." Elijah checked his speedometer. "I'm 5 under the limit." He pulled over onto the shoulder, an uneasy feeling settling in his gut. In his years in Oak Ridge, he'd had enough encounters with the local police to know they operated differently depending on which part of town you were in and what you looked like. "Keep your hands visible," he reminded Angela quietly, placing his own on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. 2 officers approached, one on either side of the car. Elijah recognized Officer Reed immediately. They'd had run-ins before at community meetings where Elijah had advocated for police accountability measures. The other officer was younger, someone Elijah didn't know. Reed shined his flashlight directly into Elijah's eyes. "License and registration." "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" Elijah kept his voice calm and respectful. "This vehicle matches the description of one involved in a reported robbery in the area," Reed said, his tone clipped. Elijah felt Angela tense beside him. Their car was a 7-year-old sedan, hardly distinctive. "I'm going to reach for my wallet." "Now," Elijah said clearly, moving slowly to extract his ID. He handed it to Reed, along with the registration from the glove compartment. Reed examined them with deliberate slowness. "Mr. Cross, the community center guy." His tone made it clear. This wasn't a coincidence. "That's right." Reed's flashlight moved to Angela. "Both occupants need to step out of the vehicle." "Is that really necessary, officer?" Angela asked. "We're just heading home from dinner." "Ma'am, I need you to exit the vehicle now." Reed's voice hardened. Elijah sensed escalation coming. "Angela, it's okay. Let's cooperate." He gave her a meaningful look, trying to communicate caution. They both carefully got out. 2 more patrol. Cars pulled up, and suddenly there were 6 officers surrounding them. The situation was spiraling beyond a routine traffic stop. "What's going on here?" Elijah asked, maintaining his composure despite the adrenaline now coursing through his system. "Turn around and place your hands against the vehicle, sir," the younger officer instructed Elijah. Angela stood her ground. "This is ridiculous. We've done nothing wrong. My husband is a respected community leader, and I'm a teacher at Oak Ridge High." Reed approached Angela, stepping too close. "Ma'am, when an officer gives you an instruction, you follow it." "I know my rights," Angela replied, straightening her spine. "You need probable cause for a search, and you've provided none." Reed's face darkened. "Always the same with you people. Think you know the law better than those who enforce it." Elijah recognized the dangerous edge in Reed's voice. His military training kicked in, assessing threats and exits, but he forced himself to remain outwardly calm. Escalation would only make things worse. "Angela, please," he began. But Reed had already grabbed Angela's arm. "You're going to cooperate, or you're going to jail. Take your hands off me." Angela tried to pull away. Reed shoved her hard against the car. The movement was sudden, aggressive, and entirely unnecessary. Everything happened in seconds after that. Elijah moved forward instinctively to protect his wife. Another officer shouted, "Gun!" A shot rang out, the sound exploding in the quiet night. Angela's body jerked. Her blue dress bloomed with red. "No!" Elijah's scream tore through the air as Angela collapsed. He lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. The officers backed away, weapons drawn, shouting contradictory commands. "Freeze! Hands up! Get on the ground!" Elijah heard none of it. His world had narrowed to Angela's face, her eyes wide with shock. "Stay with me, baby. Stay with me." His hands pressed against the wound in her chest, but blood seeped between his fingers. "Eli," her voice was barely a whisper. "Someone call an ambulance." Elijah roared, but the officers stood frozen, the reality of what they'd done slowly sinking, and Angela's gaze began to lose focus. No, Angela, look at me, look at me." Elijah cradled her face, feeling the life ebbing from her with each passing second. Her body went limp in his arms. In that moment, something broke inside Elijah Cross. Something fundamental and irreparable. The man who had spent years teaching others to choose peace over violence felt that principle dissolve as he held his wife's cooling body. The sound of another vehicle approaching barely registered until Sheriff Dalton stepped into the circle of light cast by the patrol cars. "What the hell happened here?" Dalton demanded, taking in the scene. Reed stepped forward, his face pale. "She resisted, sir. Then he moved toward us. Morris thought he saw a weapon." Dalton's eyes narrowed, already calculating. He pointed at the youngest officer. "Williams, give me your body cam." The officer hesitated, then disconnected the small device and handed it over. Dalton pocketed it without a word. "Reed, Morris, the rest of you, we're going with self-defense." The female suspect became combative during a legitimate traffic stop investigating a robbery. When officers attempted to restrain her, the male suspect made threatening movements, consistent with reaching for a weapon. The officers exchanged glances, but none protested. Dalton approached Elijah, who was still holding Angela, rocking slightly, his expression vacant. "Mr. Cross, you need to let go now," Dalton said, his voice falsely sympathetic. "There's nothing you can do for her." When Elijah didn't respond, Dalton nodded to two officers. They moved in, attempting to separate him from Angela's body. Something animal awakened in Elijah. With a roar of grief and rage, he surged upward, his military training taking over. One officer went down with a precise strike to the solar plexus. Another stumbled back, nose spurting blood. "Tase him!" Dalton shouted. Electricity coursed through Elijah's body, sending him crashing to the pavement. As darkness crowded the edges of his vision, his last sight was of Angela, lying alone on the asphalt, her blue dress now almost entirely red. Consciousness returned to Elijah in fragments, the cold metal of handcuffs around his wrists, the stale smell of the police cruiser, the taste of blood in his mouth. But mostly, the image of Angela lying motionless on the dark road, life draining from her eyes. He remained silent as they processed, him deaf to the officers' commands and questions. They took his fingerprints, photographed him, and placed him in a holding cell. Throughout it all, Elijah's mind was calculating, observing, logging details that his grief-stricken heart couldn't yet process. Through the fog of shock, he heard snippets of conversation from the officers. Got the story straight. Sheriff says stick to the script. Wasn't even armed. Cross is ex-military. Dangerous. Hours passed. The fluorescent lights never dimmed, making it impossible to track time. Eventually, Sheriff Dalton appeared outside the cell, another officer at his side. "Mr. Cross," Dalton began, his voice carrying the practiced concern of a career politician. "I wanted to personally express my condolences for what happened tonight." Elijah stared at him, unblinking. "I understand you're in shock," Dalton continued. But I need to inform you of the situation. My officers were responding to a legitimate robbery call. When they attempted to question you and your wife, the situation escalated. Mrs. Cross became combative, and you made threatening movements that my officers interpreted as reaching for a weapon. The lies should have sparked rage, but Elijah felt nothing. He was retreating into a part of himself he hadn't accessed since his days in combat, a cold, analytical state where emotions were liabilities. We'll be charging you with assaulting police officers and resisting arrest, Dalton said. Given your military background and the violent nature of your response, I've requested you be held without bail pending a psychiatric evaluation. Still, Elijah said nothing, his silence clearly unnerved Dalton. If you cooperate, things will go easier for you, the sheriff added. We can discuss reduced charges. When Elijah finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. I want to see my wife. Dalton's expression flickered. I'm afraid that's not possible right now. Her body has been taken to the county morgue for examination. Her body, Elijah repeated, the words like glass in his throat. There will be a mandatory inquest, of course, but my officers acted within protocol. Dalton straightened his uniform, jacket. I suggest you focus on getting yourself a good lawyer, Mr. Cross. As Dalton turned to leave, Elijah finally looked directly at him. Sheriff, Dalton paused. I recognize planning when I see it, Elijah said quietly. This wasn't a traffic stop gone wrong, this was deliberate. A muscle twitched in Dalton's jaw. Be careful with accusations like that, Mr. Cross. They might add to your troubles. After they left, Elijah sat on the hard bench, his back against the cold concrete wall. His mind began methodically reviewing the events of the evening, analyzing them with the precision he'd used when planning military operations. The traffic stop on a quiet road. 6 officers for a routine pullover. Reed's immediate aggression. The planted evidence they'd surely claim they found in his car. Angela's death wasn't an accident, it was an execution. While Elijah sat in his cell, the machinery of the cover-up was already in motion. In Sheriff Dalton's office, Officer Reed paced nervously while Dalton spoke on the phone. Martin, it's handled, Dalton was saying. No, it wasn't supposed to go that far, but we can use this to our advantage. Yes, I've already spoken to the DA. Don't worry about Cross, he's contained. After hanging up, Dalton turned to Reed. Sit down before you wear a hole in my floor. Reed collapsed into a chair. This is bad, sir. We killed an unarmed woman, a beloved teacher. No. Morris killed an armed suspect who was reaching for a gun during a legitimate traffic stop, Dalton corrected. That's the story. That's the only story. But there was no gun, Reed protested. Dalton pulled open a drawer and took out a small, unregistered pistol. There is now. Williams will place it at the scene during the investigation. It will have Cross's prints on it from the firearms certification he did at the range last month. Reed looked sick. Jesus, Sheriff. Pull yourself together, Dalton snapped. This isn't just about tonight. The Crosses have been undermining our authority in this town for years. All those community meetings, civilian oversight proposals, mentoring programs turning kids against us. We're finally rid of one of them, and the other will spend the rest of his life in prison. What about witnesses? The dashboard cameras? The cameras malfunctioned. Tragic technical error. Dalton's smile was cold. As for witnesses, there weren't any. Just officers doing their jobs against a dangerous suspect. The press will ask questions. Angela Cross was respected. And the press will get answers. I've already called Frank at the Oak Ridge Herald. The headline tomorrow will read, Beloved, teacher killed in tragic police encounter, husband attacks officers. Reed wiped sweat from his forehead. And if Cross talks? Who would believe him? By tomorrow, he'll be painted as an unstable, violent ex-military man who couldn't readjust to civilian life, a tragedy waiting to happen. The next morning, headlines across local news outlets told exactly the story Dalton had crafted. Local teacher killed in police confrontation. Armed suspect shot during traffic stop. Military veteran attacks police. After wife's shooting. Oak Ridge was a small town of just under 50,000 people, and news spread quickly. By noon, two distinct narratives were forming. In the predominantly white affluent West Side, people shook their heads over coffee about the tragedy of a good woman married to a dangerous man. On the East Side, in the neighborhoods where Angela had taught and Elijah had mentored, disbelief and anger simmered. At Oak Ridge High School, students gathered in stunned silence as Principal Wilson made the announcement over the intercom about Ms. Cross's death, carefully using the police-approved language of officer-involved incident. In Angela's classroom, someone placed flowers on her desk. By afternoon, it was covered. Marcus Taylor, the boy Elijah had been training at the community center, sat in class with tears streaming down his face, ignoring the pitying looks from his classmates. After school, he tried to visit Elijah at the police station but was turned away. "He's not allowed visitors," the desk sergeant told him brusquely. "Go home, kid." Instead, Marcus went to the community center, to the gym where he'd trained with Elijah just 2 days earlier. He punched the bag until his knuckles bled, Elijah's words echoing in his mind. Violence without purpose solves nothing. But what purpose could there be in Angela's death? In his cell, Elijah had not slept. His military training had taught him to go days without rest when necessary, and his mind was too active for sleep anyway. He had spent the night observing the patterns of the jail, guard rotations, security camera placements, structural weaknesses in the facility. The morning brought a visitor, a public defender named Sarah Foster, a harried-looking woman in her EBO-30s with a stack of files under her arm. "Mr. Cross, I've been assigned to your case," she began, sitting across from him at the small table in the interview room. "I should warn you that the charges are serious. Assaulting police officers carries significant penalties, and given the circumstances, they murdered my wife," Elijah said simply. Foster paused, studying him. "I understand you're grieving, but accusations like that won't help your case. The official report states that Officer Morris discharged his weapon in response to a perceived threat after your wife became combative. That's a lie. Mr. Cross, I'm here to help you, but you need to be realistic. It's your word against 6 officers. The sheriff's department claims they found an unregistered handgun in your vehicle." Elijah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "They're planting evidence." Foster lowered her voice. "Look, I know how these things can go. I've defended plenty of cases where the official story didn't match reality. But right now, we need to focus on getting you out of here." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Sheriff Dalton is pushing for a psychiatric hold. He's claiming your military background and the trauma of your wife's death have made you unstable and dangerous." "Of course he is," Elijah said. "He wants to discredit anything I might say." "The court has ordered an evaluation tomorrow. My advice is to cooperate. Show them you're grieving but rational." Foster leaned forward. "Mr. Cross, I'll be honest with you. This town has a power structure. The sheriff, the DA, certain business interests, they protect each other. If you start making accusations..." "I understand how power works, Ms. Foster. Better than most." Elijah met her gaze steadily. "How long have you been a public defender in Oak Ridge?" 4 years. "And in those 4 years, how many cases have you won against the sheriff's department?" Foster's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought." Elijah sat back. "I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to take my case, but I suggest you distance yourself from me after today." "What do you mean?" "I mean that things are going to get complicated, and you don't want to be caught in the middle." Foster studied him with growing concern. "Mr. Cross, please don't do anything that would make your situation worse." Elijah's smile was devoid of warmth. "My wife is dead, Ms. Foster. Murdered by corrupt cops who will walk free unless I do something. My situation can't get worse." After Foster left, Elijah was returned to his cell. The jail was small, with just 20 cells in the main block. From his position, he could see the guard station, the exit doors, and the hallway leading to processing. He cataloged each detail, each potential weakness, filing the information away. In his former life, Elijah had been trained not just for combat, but for strategic thinking in hostile environments. Assess, adapt, overcome. The jail was just another hostile environment, the guards just another opposing force. As he sat on his bunk, appearing passive and defeated to anyone watching, his mind was assembling a plan, not just for escape but for justice. For Angela. At the Alderman estate, Martin sat in his study, a glass of scotch in hand despite the early hour. Chase slouched in a chair opposite him, his face pale. "They weren't supposed to kill her," Chase said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You said they were just going to scare them." Martin swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Complications arise in these situations. The important thing is that the problem is being handled. She was my teacher, Dad. Everyone loved her. And now everyone will believe she was the unfortunate victim of her unstable husband's poor choices." Martin's tone was matter-of-fact. "The narrative is already established. By next week, people will have moved on to the next tragedy." Chase looked at his father with new eyes, seeing something cold and calculating that had always been there but that he'd chosen to ignore. "What happens to Mr. Cross?" "He'll be charged, convicted, and imprisoned. With his history of violence." "What? History of violence? He was a soldier, not a criminal." Martin's expression hardened. "By the time the sheriff and DA are finished, the town will believe whatever narrative we need them to. Elijah Cross was a ticking time bomb, a trained killer who finally snapped. Angela was his victim as much as ours." Chase looked away, unable to meet his father's gaze. "This is wrong." "This is necessary," Martin corrected. The Crosses were becoming problematic. Angela with her community organizing. Elijah with his mentoring programs turning the East Side against the natural order of things in this town. They were creating division, undermining authority. "So they deserve to die?" Chase's voice cracked. Martin set down his glass with deliberate care. "No one said anything about deserving, Chase. This is about maintaining the status quo. About protecting our interests. Sometimes regrettable things happen in pursuit of the greater good." "The greater good," Chase repeated hollowly. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Martin studied his son, disappointment evident in his expression. "You needed to be protected. Angela Cross was threatening your future. I did what any father would do." "No," Chase said, rising from his chair. "Not any father, just you." As Chase left the room, Martin returned to his scotch, unconcerned. His son would come around eventually. He always did. The real issue now was ensuring that Elijah Cross remained contained. There was something about the man that made Martin uneasy, a quiet capability that suggested he might not be as easily disposable as his wife had been. Martin reached for his phone to call Sheriff Dalton. Better to ensure that all loose ends were properly tied up. That night, as Elijah lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, a guard approached his cell. "Cross, you've got mail." The guard passed a small envelope through the bars. Elijah examined it. No return address, no postmark. It had come from inside the system. When the guard had moved on, Elijah carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper with a typed message. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Help is coming. Stay ready." Cipher. Elijah stared at the cryptic message for a long moment, then methodically tore it into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet in his cell. For the first time since Angela's murder, a flicker of something like hope stirred in his chest. Not hope for redemption or peace. Those possibilities had died with Angela on that dark road. But hope for justice, for vengeance. Elijah Cross, the man who had spent years teaching others to choose peace over violence, made a silent vow as he returned to his bunk. Sheriff Dalton, Officer Reed, Martin Alderman, and everyone else involved in Angela's death would pay. Not quickly, not cleanly, but thoroughly and completely. They had taken everything from him. Now he would take everything from them, and as he finally closed his eyes, allowing himself a few hours of tactical rest before the coming storm, the last image in his mind was Angela's face, not as she had looked in death, but in life. Strong, principled, and loving. The woman who had believed in second chances and rehabilitation over retribution. "I'm sorry, Angela," he whispered to the empty cell. "But some things can't be forgiven." 3 days had passed since Angela's death. 3 days of Elijah observing, calculating, and waiting. The guards had fallen into a predictable pattern. Shift changes at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., meal deliveries at fixed times, security checks every 2 hours. The night guard, Peterson, was particularly lazy, spending most of his shift playing games on his phone. Elijah also noted the structural weaknesses of the facility. It was an old building, retrofitted with modern security systems, but fundamentally flawed in its design. The ventilation system hadn't been updated, and the cell door locks were electronic but with manual overrides, standard protocol for fire safety. On his 4th morning in custody, a new inmate was brought in and placed in the cell across from Elijah's. The man was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the lean, alert physique that Elijah recognized immediately as military or intelligence. Once the guards moved away, the man caught Elijah's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. When the block was quiet, the man spoke, his voice barely audible. "Elijah Cross. Been following your work at the community center." Elijah studied him. "Who are you?" "Name's Darius Wright. Former CIA." He glanced toward the cameras. "We have about 30 seconds between camera sweeps to talk." "What are you in for?" Elijah asked. "Officially? Drunk and disorderly." "Really?" "I'm here because Cypher sent me." Elijah remained impassive, but his pulse quickened. "Who is Cypher?" "Someone who's been watching Dalton for years, gathering evidence on his operation." Darius leaned closer to the bars. "It's not just petty corruption, Cross. Dalton and Alderman are running drugs, weapons, laundering money. They've got half the department on their payroll. And my wife?" Darius's expression sobered. "She was getting too close. That confrontation with Alderman's kid was just the excuse they needed." The pieces fell into place in Elijah's mind. Angela had been trying to protect her students, unknowingly threatening a much larger criminal enterprise. Her death wasn't just about silencing a teacher who stood up to a spoiled rich kid. It was about protecting a criminal empire. "I'm going to kill them all," Elijah said quietly, the words more statement of fact than threat. "You can't do it from in here," Darius replied. "And that's not the right play anyway. Killing them is too quick. You need to dismantle everything they've built, expose them, make them watch as their world collapses." "So what's your plan?" "Don't have one, but I'm guessing you do." Elijah had indeed been formulating an escape strategy. The psychiatric evaluation scheduled for today would move him out of his cell, creating opportunity. But he'd need a distraction. "Be ready at 2 p.m., Elijah said. "When they take me for evaluation." Darius nodded once, then turned away as a guard approached on rounds. 2 o'clock came. 2 guards arrived to escort Elijah to his psychiatric evaluation. As they led him down the corridor, handcuffed but not shackled, Elijah remained compliant, head down, presenting the image of a broken man. They passed the communal area where several inmates were having their recreation time. Darius was among them, engaged in what appeared to be a friendly card game. As Elijah passed, Darius caught his eye and gave the slightest nod. Suddenly, Darius stood, flipping the table. "You cheating son of a bitch!" he shouted at another inmate. Chaos erupted. The guards escorting Elijah hesitated, torn between their assignment and the fight breaking out. One guard moved to assist, leaving Elijah with a single escort. It was the opening he needed. In one fluid motion, Elijah brought his cuffed hands up and then down hard, using the chain between the cuffs to trap the remaining guard's arm. A precise strike to the throat silenced any alarm, and a sweep of the leg brought the guard down. Elijah used the guard's own body weight to dislocate his shoulder, rendering him unconscious from the pain. Retrieving the guard's keys, Elijah uncuffed himself and moved swiftly toward the building's east exit, the one he'd identified as having the camera blind spot. But as he rounded the corner, he came face to face with Sheriff Dalton. For a moment, they both froze in surprise. Then Dalton reached for his gun. Elijah moved faster. A strike to Dalton's wrist prevented the draw, followed by a brutal punch to the solar plexus that doubled the sheriff over. Dalton was a large man but soft, unused to real combat. "This is for Angela," Elijah growled, delivering a precise blow to Dalton's temple that sent him crashing to the floor. Alarms began blaring. Elijah knew he had seconds, not minutes. He took Dalton's gun, ID badge, and keys, then headed for the exit. The door required keycard access. Elijah swiped Dalton's badge and pushed through, emerging into the staff parking lot. Selecting the most anonymous-looking vehicle, a navy blue sedan, he used Dalton's keys to unlock it, half expecting to find it wouldn't match. It did. Sometimes luck favored the prepared, as Elijah drove away from the station, keeping his speed. Steady and unremarkable, he heard sirens beginning to wail behind him. Not for him, not yet, but that would change soon. He needed somewhere to go, resources, allies. He thought of the mysterious cipher, of Darius sacrificing his own freedom to create a distraction. Clearly there were people working against Dalton's corruption, but who could he trust? Only one name came to mind: Hawk, William Hawk. Harrison lived 40 minutes outside town in a secluded cabin. He and Elijah had served in Delta Force together, saved each other's lives more times than either could count. After discharge, Hawk had chosen isolation while Elijah had chosen community. They'd stayed in touch but seen each other infrequently. As Elijah drove Dalton's sedan down the winding dirt road to Hawk's property, he spotted the security measures: cameras disguised as birdhouses, motion sensors hidden in the brush. Hawk was paranoid, but paranoia kept you alive in their line of work. Elijah stopped 100 yards from the cabin and approached on foot, hands visible. Before he reached the porch, the door opened, and Hawk emerged with a shotgun. "I heard what happened," Hawk said, lowering the weapon. He was a tall, rangy man with hard eyes and a face weathered by years in harsh climates. "Been waiting for you." "How?" Elijah asked. "News travels, and I've got a police scanner." He gestured Elijah inside. "They're saying you escaped custody after assaulting the sheriff, that you're armed and dangerous, mentally unstable." "They're not entirely wrong." Elijah entered the cabin, taking in the sparse but functional space. Weapons rack on one wall, surveillance monitors on another. "I need your help, Hawk." "You've got it." The simplicity of Hawk's response spoke to their history. No questions, no conditions. "What's the plan?" "I need to gather evidence on Dalton and Alderman. They're running something big. Drugs, weapons, money laundering." Angela stumbled into it. "They killed her to protect themselves." Hawk's expression hardened. "I met Angela at your wedding. Good woman. Better than either of us deserved." He moved to a cabinet and unlocked it, revealing an arsenal. "Take what you need." Elijah selected items with care: a 9mm pistol with suppressor, combat knife, tactical clothing, burner phones, and a laptop. "There's something else," Elijah said, thinking of the mysterious message. "Someone called Cipher contacted me in jail. Said they were gathering evidence on Dalton." "Cipher?" Hawk frowned. There were rumors in the intelligence community about an operative who went rogue, started targeting corrupt officials, calling themselves Cipher. Thought it was just a ghost story. Apparently not. They sent someone to help me escape. Ex-CIA. Named Darius Wright. Hawk nodded thoughtfully. If Cipher's real, and they've been building a case against Dalton, that could be helpful. Elijah sat down heavily, the events of the past few days finally catching up to him. "I need to know everything about Dalton and Alderman, their operations, their men, their vulnerabilities. I can help with that." Hawk opened his laptop. "I've been monitoring chatter, small town like Oak Ridge, corruption that deep leaves traces." He pulled up maps, financial records, surveillance photos. "Alderman owns most of the commercial real estate, but there are properties under shell companies that don't make sense. Warehouses that use massive electricity, but have no official business, buildings with tight security but no apparent purpose. Distribution centers," Elijah realized. "Storage facilities." Exactly. And Dalton's men provide security, make sure shipments aren't interfered with. Hawk pointed to financial records. Money moves through Alderman's legitimate businesses, comes out clean on the other side. Elijah studied the information, his military mind plotting and planning. I need to hit them where it hurts first. Send a message. The shipments, Hawk suggested. According to what I've gathered, there's a major one coming in tomorrow night. Warehouse on the east side near the old railroad yard. Elijah nodded, a cold determination settling over him. I'll need surveillance equipment, explosives. Hawk grinned, a predatory expression. Christmas came early, brother. He opened another cabinet, revealing an array of specialized equipment. Been collecting, just in case. As they prepared through the night, Elijah thought of Angela. She'd always believed in his capacity for good, had helped him channel his military training into community service rather than violence. There was a bitter irony in returning to that violence now, in her name. She wouldn't approve, he said quietly, checking the action on his pistol. Hawk glanced at him. Maybe not. But Angela's not here because these people murdered her. Sometimes, justice isn't clean. This isn't about justice, Elijah replied. It's about vengeance. For you, maybe, Hawk said. But what happens in Oak Ridge afterward? When Dalton and Alderman are gone, who steps into that void? Think Angela would want it to be someone worse? Elijah paused, considering. Angela had always thought beyond the immediate, to the long-term welfare of the community. If he was going to honor her memory truly, perhaps there needed to be more to his plan than simple revenge. I need to gather evidence, he decided. Not just destroy them, but expose them. Make sure whatever replaces them is better. Hawk nodded, approvingly. That sounds like something Angela would get behind. As dawn approached, Elijah received an encrypted message on one of the burner phones. The text was simple. Check the encrypted email account on this device. Security footage from the night Angela died. Use it wisely. Cipher. Elijah opened the email to find a video file. It showed dashcam footage from one of the patrol cars at the scene of Angela's shooting, footage that Dalton had claimed didn't exist due to technical malfunctions. The video clearly showed Angela being shoved by Officer Reed, Elijah moving, to protect her, and Officer Morris firing without provocation. There was no gun, no threat, just murder, captured in cold, hard pixels. This is it, Elijah said, his voice tight. Proof of what they did. It's a start, Hawk agreed. But it's not enough to bring down their whole operation. No, Elijah agreed, a dangerous light in his eyes. But it's enough to begin. Over the next 2 days, Elijah transformed himself from a community mentor into the weapon he'd once been for his country. His body remembered the training, the mindset, the cold calculation needed for covert operations. He set up surveillance on the warehouse. Hawk had identified, observing patterns, security measures, personnel. The operation was professional. Armed guards, regular patrols, security cameras. But every system had weaknesses, and Elijah had been trained to find them. On the third night, he made his move. Using the shadows as cover, he approached the warehouse, from the blind side, where a drainage ditch provided concealment. The guards were vigilant but predictable in their patterns. Elijah waited for the patrol to pass, then moved swiftly to the building. He placed small explosive charges at strategic points, not to destroy the warehouse but to create diversions. Once in position, he triggered the first charge. The explosion was small but loud, drawing guards to the south side of the building. Elijah used the distraction to enter through a service door on the north side, neutralizing the lone guard with a precise strike that rendered him unconscious. Inside, the warehouse was stacked with crates. Elijah moved quickly, documenting everything with a small camera. Drugs, weapons, cash, the evidence of Dalton and Alderman's criminal enterprise laid bare. He collected samples, took photographs, then rigged the main storage area with explosives. Not enough to level the building. He didn't want civilian casualties, but enough to destroy the evidence of their crimes and send a message. As he finished setting the charges, voices approached. Elijah melted into the shadows as 2 men entered. Chase, Alderman and Officer Reed. "Dad's going to kill me," Chase was saying, his voice tense. This was supposed to be a simple pickup. Nothing simple anymore, Reed replied. Not since Cross escaped. Your father and the sheriff are on edge. Do they really think he'll come after us? He's one man. Reed laughed bitterly. You don't understand what he is, do you? Cross was Delta Force, their best. He's not just one man. He's a weapon, and we just gave him the best reason in the world to use everything he knows. This is insane, Chase muttered. No one was supposed to die. It was just supposed to be a warning. Well, it's too late for that now, isn't it? Reed snapped. Angela Cross is dead. Her husband is coming for all of us, and your father expects us to handle a shipment worth millions while looking over our shoulders. Elijah felt a cold satisfaction hearing the fear in their voices. They should be afraid. He waited until they left, then proceeded with his plan. Outside the warehouse, at a safe distance, Elijah triggered the explosives. The blast illuminated the night, the warehouse erupting in flames as emergency sirens began to wail in the distance. But he wasn't finished. At the scene, Elijah left his first calling card, a single bullet and a handwritten note. You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you. It was just the beginning. The explosion at the warehouse sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge. The official story, a gas leak, convinced no one, especially when rumors spread about what had been stored there. Sheriff Dalton called an emergency meeting at the station. His face was bruised from his encounter with Elijah. His authority diminished in the eyes of his officers. Cross is officially our top priority, Dalton announced, looking around the room. I want roadblocks, house-to-house searches, every available resource directed at finding him. Officer Reed spoke up, his voice tense. Sir, the warehouse contained millions in product and cash. Whoever hit it knew exactly what they were targeting. It was Cross, Dalton snapped. And this is just the beginning. He's going to come after everyone involved. Maybe we should bring in state police, another officer suggested. Or the FBI. No! Dalton's face reddened. This is our jurisdiction. We handle it ourselves. After the meeting, Dalton called Martin Alderman. We have a serious problem. The warehouse was hit last night. Everything's gone. Product, cash, all of it. Cross? Alderman asked, his usual composure slipping. Has to be. He left a calling card. Dalton described the bullet and note. Silence stretched on the other end of the line. When Alderman spoke again, his voice was cold with fury. Find him, whatever it costs. I want him dead before he can do any more damage. I'm bringing in professionals, Dalton said. Mercenaries with the right skill set to handle someone like Cross. Do it, Alderman authorized. Money is no object. While Dalton and Alderman scrambled to contain the damage, Elijah planned his next move. The warehouse had been a warning shot. Now it was time to start breaking the chain of command. Officer Morris, who had fired the shot that killed Angela, lived in a small house on the west side of town. Elijah watched the house for a full day, noting Morris's routine, his security measures, minimal, and his habit of drinking heavily after his shift. That night, when Morris staggered home alone, Elijah was waiting. Morris fumbled with his keys. At the door, too intoxicated to notice the shadow that detached itself from the darkness behind him, he felt only a sudden pressure as Elijah's arm locked around his throat, cutting off blood flow to his brain. Seconds later, Morris collapsed, unconscious, but alive. Elijah dragged him inside. When Morris awoke, he was duct-taped to a chair in his own living room. His service weapon was on the coffee table just out of reach, and across from him sat Elijah Cross, calm and still as death. Officer Morris, Elijah said quietly, you don't know me, but you murdered my wife. Morris's eyes widened in terror. He tried to speak through the tape covering his mouth, producing only muffled sounds of panic. Elijah reached forward and ripped the tape away. I have questions. You have answers. How this goes depends on your cooperation. Please, Morris gasped. It was an accident. I never meant to shoot her. The dashcam footage says otherwise, Elijah replied, his voice still unnervingly calm. But right now, I'm more interested in what happened afterward. The cover-up. Who gave the orders? Morris swallowed hard. Dalton. He said we needed to make it look like your wife was the aggressor, that you were dangerous. And the planted gun? That was Reed's idea. Dalton approved it. Elijah nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. Tell me about Alderman, his operation. I don't know details, Morris protested. I'm just patrol. Dalton keeps the major operations compartmentalized. But you know it exists. Elijah's stare was unrelenting. Drugs, weapons, money laundering. Morris hesitated, then nodded. Everyone knows. The smart ones stay quiet and take their cut. The ones who don't end up like my wife, Elijah finished. Look, Cross, I'm sorry about what happened. I panicked. Reed was escalating things, and when you moved, save it, Elijah cut him off. I'm not here for your apologies. He reached into his pocket and produced a small digital recorder. You're going to tell the truth. All of it. About the night Angela died. About Dalton's operation. About Alderman's involvement. Morris stared at the recorder, then at Elijah. If I do that, I'm a dead man. If you don't, you're a dead man right now, Elijah countered. Cooperate, and I'll ensure you get into witness protection. Refuse. He let the implication hang in the air. For the next hour, Morris talked about the systematic corruption in the department, about how Dalton selected officers who could be bought or intimidated, about the drug shipments from out of state, the weapons deals with local gangs, the money laundered through Alderman's businesses, and about Angela, how her confrontation with Chase had triggered panic because she was getting too close to their operation through the school. Alderman gave the order, Morris confirmed. Dalton passed it to Reed, who assigned me to the traffic stop. It was supposed to be a warning, maybe plant some drugs in the car. I swear I never knew it would end with her dead. When he'd finished, Elijah stopped the recorder. One more thing. You're going to call Reed. Tell him you need to meet. Say you think you saw me near your house. And then what? Then you disappear, Elijah said. There's a bus station 3 blocks from here. Take it to Portsmouth. Someone will meet you there with new identification and instructions. Who? Morris asked, bewildered. Cypher, Elijah replied. You won't see me again if you cooperate, if you betray me, if you warn Reed or Dalton. He left the threat unspoken. After making the call to Reed, arranging a meeting at an abandoned construction site, Morris left with a small bag of essentials and the clothes on his back. Whether he would actually find help in Portsmouth, Elijah didn't know. But the fear of Elijah's retribution would keep him moving forward rather than back. Reed arrived at the construction site shortly after midnight, alone as instructed. The area was dark, the half-built structure creating strange shadows in the moonlight. Morris? Reed called out, hand on his holstered weapon. Where are you? From the darkness came a voice, not Morris's, but Elijah's. He's gone, but I'm here. Reed drew his gun, spinning around. Cross, show yourself. Put the weapon down, Reed. Elijah's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. You're surrounded. It was a bluff. Elijah was alone. But Reed's panicked mind filled the shadows with threats. His gun wavered as he turned in circles. You're making a mistake, Cross, Reed called. Whatever you think happened to your wife, I know exactly what happened. Elijah's voice hardened. Morris told me everything. About the orders from Dalton, from Alderman. About how it was supposed to be a warning that got out of hand. Morris is lying. I have his confession recorded. And I have the dashcam footage that Dalton claimed didn't exist. This froze Reed in his tracks. That's impossible. All the footage was deleted. Not all of it, Elijah said. And now I have you confirming the cover-up on my recording. Reed fired wildly into the darkness, the sound of his gunshots echoing through the empty construction site. Show yourself, you coward. Elijah moved silently behind Reed, placing his gun against the back of the officer's head. Drop your weapon. Reed froze, then slowly lowered his gun to the ground. On your knees, Elijah ordered. Reed complied, his body trembling. Just get it over with, he whispered, eyes closed. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead already, Elijah said. Turn around. Reed turned to face Elijah, his face pale with fear. "What do you want?" "Information. And a messenger." Elijah's expression was calm, controlled, the face of a man who had moved beyond rage to something colder and more calculated. For the next 10 minutes, Elijah questioned Reed, getting names, details, locations of other storage facilities, upcoming shipments. Reed, believing his life hung in the balance, held nothing back. "Last question," Elijah said finally. "Who else was involved in the decision to target Angela?" Reed hesitated. "Just Dalton and Alderman as far as I know. And Chase. The kid was the one who complained about her in the first place." Elijah nodded. "Here's what happens now. You're going to take a message back to Dalton." "What message?" "That I'm coming for him last." Elijah's voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I'm going to dismantle everything he's built piece by piece. I'm going to take his money, his power, his freedom. And then, when he has nothing left, I'm coming for him." Reed stared at Elijah, seeing not grief or rage, but something far more terrifying, methodical, implacable purpose. "Tell him he can run, he can hide, he can call in every favor and hire every mercenary. It won't matter." Elijah stepped back, fading into the shadows. "Tell him I'll see him soon." By the time Reed gathered enough courage to reach for his gun, Elijah was long gone, leaving behind only the echo of his promise. The next morning, a video appeared online. It showed Officer Morris, face clearly visible, detailing the corruption in the Oak Ridge Police Department, the criminal network run by Sheriff Dalton and Martin Alderman, and the truth about Angela Cross's death. The video went viral within hours, picked up by local news stations and then regional networks. Alongside it was the dashcam footage, undeniable evidence that Angela had been murdered without cause. Oak Ridge exploded with outrage. Protesters gathered outside the police station and Alderman's corporate headquarters. The mayor called an emergency press conference, promising a full investigation. Sheriff Dalton barricaded himself in his office, fielding frantic calls from his corrupt officers and from Martin Alderman. "Who leaked it?" Alderman demanded. "How? Did Cross get that footage?" "I don't know," Dalton admitted. "Someone inside must have helped him. We've got a rat." "Damage control," Alderman ordered. "Discredit Morris. Say he was drunk, unstable, that the footage was doctored." "It's too late for that," Dalton argued. "We need to cut our losses. Move the remaining product. Burn the paper trail. Get out while we can." "No one is going anywhere," Alderman said coldly. "We contain this." "Where's Reed?" He came back from the meeting with Cross white as a sheet. Said Cross has declared war on us. "One man can't stand against our entire operation," Alderman insisted. "This isn't just one man," Dalton countered. "He's got help. Someone technically skilled enough to access our secured footage. Someone with resources. And now he's got the public on his side." Outside the station, the crowd continued to grow. Signs demanded justice for Angela Cross. Chants called for Dalton's resignation, Alderman's arrest. And somewhere in the shadows, Elijah watched, his revenge just beginning. 3 days after the video leak, Oak Ridge had transformed. National news vans lined the streets, FBI agents conducted interviews at the police station, and Sheriff Dalton had declared a state of emergency, ostensibly to maintain order, but everyone knew it was to legitimize the roadblocks and patrols, searching for Elijah Cross. In his office, Dalton paced frantically, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it costs. Find him and end this," he hissed to the mercenary commander on the other end of the line. He'd hired a team of ex-military contractors, men with few scruples and plenty of experience hunting high-value targets. After hanging up, Dalton turned to his remaining loyal officers, Reed among them, though he hadn't slept properly since his encounter with Elijah. "We're instituting a curfew. Anyone on the streets after 9 p.m. gets detained. I want maximum presence in the east side. That's where he'll have the most support." "Sir," Reed ventured hesitantly, "the FBI is asking questions about the dashcam footage. They want access to our servers." "Stall them," Dalton ordered. "Say it's corrupted. Say we need warrants. Whatever buys us time." "Time for what?" Reed asked. "This whole town is turning against us. Dalton's eyes narrowed dangerously. Time to finish this. Cross thinks he's dismantling our operation. He's just making it easier to find him. Every move he makes brings him closer to us. As the meeting dispersed, Dalton's phone buzzed with a text from Martin Alderman. My office. Now. Across town, in a basement converted into a command center, Elijah studied surveillance feeds with Hawk and a new ally, Cypher, who had finally emerged from the shadows. To Elijah's surprise, Cypher was a woman in her early 30s named Maya Chen, former military intelligence with a gift for cybersecurity. She'd been tracking corruption in law enforcement for years, building cases and occasionally taking direct action when the system failed. Dalton's declared martial law in everything, but name, Maya noted watching the feeds showing police checkpoints throughout Oak Ridge. He's scared. Good, Elijah said. Fear makes men careless. It also makes them dangerous, Hawk countered. He's brought in contractors, ex-Blackwater types. Elijah nodded. He'd expected as much. Any word from our FBI contact? Agent Vaughn is officially investigating the dashcam footage, Maya confirmed. But she's hitting roadblocks. Her superiors seem reluctant to pursue Dalton too aggressively. Political connections, Hawk suggested. Alderman's got friends in high places. Then we need to be more aggressive, Elijah decided. It's time to cut off their resources completely. He pointed to a map where several locations were marked: warehouses, businesses, private properties. These are all part of their operation, according to the information we've gathered from Morris and our surveillance. Hit them all at once? Hawk asked, eyebrows raised. Exactly. A coordinated strike that leaves them nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no resources to fight back. Maya looked skeptical. That's a tall order for 3 people, even with your backgrounds. We won't be 3 for long, Elijah replied. There are people in this town who've suffered under Dalton and Alderman for years. They just needed someone to lead them. He gestured to another screen showing Marcus, the teenager he'd been mentoring, along with several other community members from the East Side, including veterans and former police officers who'd been forced out for not playing along with corruption. I've been recruiting, Elijah explained. People who have skills, people who've been waiting for a chance to fight back. You're building an army, Maya said, impressed. I'm building a resistance, Elijah corrected. And tonight, we make our first coordinated move. That evening at the Alderman estate, Martin confronted his son in the study. The FBI is sniffing around my businesses, he growled. Your little problem with your teacher has spiraled into a full-blown disaster. Chase, pale and drawn from days of stress, glared back. My problem? You're the one who had her killed. Keep your voice down, Martin hissed. Nothing's been proven. The whole town has seen the dashcam footage, Chase shot back. Everyone knows. What happened to Mrs. Cross? And now her husband is tearing apart everything you and Dalton built. Martin poured himself a generous scotch. We still have options, resources. Cross is just one man. He's not alone anymore, Chase said quietly. Haven't you seen the news? People are rallying behind him. The East Side is practically an open revolt. Which is why Dalton declared emergency powers, Martin countered. By tomorrow, we'll have this contained. A sudden explosion in the distance made both men flinch. Then another, and another. A series of blasts from different directions, across Oak Ridge. Martin's phone rang. It was Dalton, his voice tight with panic. We're under attack. Multiple locations hit simultaneously. The warehouse on Pine, the processing facility near the river, the storage unit where we keep the books. What about the shipment? Martin demanded. The one coming in tonight? Gone. Intercepted. Cross left another message, said he's just getting started. Martin ended the call, his face ashen. He's hitting everything at once, he told Chase. Somehow he knows all our locations, all our operations. What do we do? Chase asked, fear evident in his voice. We leave, Martin decided. Now, I have contingency plans, accounts overseas. We can be out of the country by morning. But as they moved toward the door, the power in the mansion cut out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lights activated. casting eerie shadows. Then the security system began to wail. "What's happening?" Chase demanded. Martin grabbed a gun from his desk drawer. "It's him. He's here." At the police station, chaos reigned. Reports of explosions and raids flooded in faster than Dalton could process them. The mercenaries he'd hired were scattered across town, trying to respond to multiple threats simultaneously. "Sir," an officer burst into his office, "the National Guard is mobilizing. The governor's office says they're responding to reports of paramilitary activity in Oak Ridge." "No." Dalton slammed his fist on the desk. "This is my jurisdiction. I didn't authorize—" "Sir, I don't think they're asking permission," the officer interrupted. "And there's something else. Someone's hacked our communications. Every radio, every computer, they're all broadcasting a message." Dalton grabbed the nearest radio and heard Elijah's calm, measured voice. "Citizens of Oak Ridge. For years, Sheriff Dalton and Martin Alderman have poisoned this town with corruption and violence. They've used the police as their private army, used their wealth to crush opposition, and murdered those who stood in their way, including my wife, Angela Cross. Tonight that ends." The broadcast continued, detailing specific crimes, locations, naming corrupt officers, politicians, and businessmen who had enabled Dalton and Alderman's criminal enterprise. "He's exposing everything," Reed said, his face pale. "Everyone." As if to confirm his fears, Dalton's phone buzzed with a series of texts from his co-conspirators, all variations on the same theme. "Deal's off. I'm out. Don't contact me again." The rats were fleeing the sinking ship. "Get to Alderman's," Dalton ordered Reed. "We're leaving town. Tonight." Reed hesitated. "Sir, the roads are blocked. Cross's people are everywhere. And now the National Guard is coming." "Then we fight our way out," Dalton roared, grabbing his tactical gear. "I'm not going down because of one grieving husband with a vendetta." As they prepared to leave, a call came in from one of the mercenaries. "Sheriff, we've got a problem at the North Checkpoint. Someone's approaching, alone, unarmed." "Who?" Dalton demanded. "It's Cross. He says he wants to talk to you, face to face." Dalton exchanged looks with Reed. "Is this a trap?" "Has to be," Reed replied. "But maybe it's also an opportunity." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Dalton's face. "Tell the team to let him approach. But be ready. When he's in range, take the shot." Elijah approached the police checkpoint alone, hands visible, face illuminated by the harsh spotlights. He knew it was a risk, but a calculated one. Behind him, throughout Oak Ridge, his network was dismantling what remained of Dalton and Alderman's operation. This confrontation was meant to be a distraction. Keep Dalton focused on him while the real work continued elsewhere. "That's far enough." "Cross," a mercenary called out, rifle trained on Elijah's chest. Elijah stopped, 20 yards from the barricade. "I'm here to speak with Sheriff Dalton." "Sheriff's busy," the mercenary replied, "but he left a message for you." Elijah sensed the trap an instant before it was sprung. He dove sideways as a sniper round cracked through the air where his head had been. Rolling behind a parked car, he heard the mercenaries changing position, surrounding him. The confrontation had been a gamble. Now came the second part of his plan. An explosion rocked the police station a block away. Not destructive, just loud and bright enough to draw attention. As the mercenaries turned instinctively toward the blast, Elijah moved, swift and silent, using the distraction to slip between buildings and disappear into the network of alleyways he'd memorized for just this purpose. By the time the mercenaries realized he was gone, Elijah was already halfway to his actual target, Martin Alderman's mansion. Martin and Chase Alderman had abandoned their plans to flee when they realized the roads were blocked. Now they huddled in Martin's panic room, a reinforced chamber beneath the mansion stocked with supplies, weapons, and communication equipment. The mercenaries failed, Martin said grimly, hanging up the secure phone. Cross escaped the ambush. Dalton's on his way here. "Why here?" Chase demanded. "We should be running." "There's nowhere to run," Martin replied. "But this room is built to withstand anything short of military-grade explosives. We waited out here, let Dalton's men handle Cross, then slip away. When the National Guard arrives and creates confusion." A noise from the main house made them both freeze. Security system says all clear, Martin whispered, checking the monitors. Then why do I hear footsteps? Chase hissed back. The panic room door, 3 inches of reinforced steel, suddenly groaned as something heavy slammed against it from the outside. Impossible, Martin breathed. That door can't be breached without the code. Another slam, and the door's electronic lock flickered. Unless someone gave him the code, Martin said slowly, turning to look at his son with sudden suspicion. Chase backed away. I didn't. I would never. A third impact, and the door swung open to reveal Elijah Cross, flanked by Hawk and Marcus, the teenager from the community center. Martin Alderman, Elijah said calmly. We need to talk. Sheriff. Dalton arrived at the Alderman estate 30 minutes later, with Reed and 4 mercenaries in tow. The mansion's front gate hung open, security systems disabled. Spread out, Dalton ordered. Find Alderman and his son, and if Cross is here, shoot on sight. The mercenaries moved with professional efficiency, clearing rooms, checking corners. Dalton and Reed headed for Martin's study, where a light burned despite the rest of the house being dark. Inside, they found Martin Alderman tied to his office chair, his face bloody but conscious. A laptop sat open on the desk in front of him, screen glowing. Martin! Dalton rushed forward. Where's Cross? Alderman's eyes were wide with fear. He knows everything, Bill. Every dealer, every cop on the payroll, every politician we've bribed. He made me record a confession. Where is he now? Dalton demanded, drawing his weapon. Gone. Took Chase as insurance. Martin's voice cracked. But he left that for you. He nodded toward the laptop. On the screen was a map with a single location, marked. The old police training facility on the outskirts of town, abandoned years ago when budget cuts forced consolidation. It's a trap, Reed said immediately. Of course it's a trap, Dalton snarled. But it's also our chance to end this. He turned to the mercenary leader. Call in everyone. Every man you have. We're going to finish Cross once and for all. National Guard will be here within hours, Reed protested. We should wait, let them handle it. And face federal charges? Dalton laughed bitterly. No, Cross dies tonight by our hands. That's the only way this ends, with us walking away free. As the mercenaries prepared for the assault, Dalton received a text from a blocked number. I'll be waiting. Just you and me. Finish what you started. Dalton showed it to Reed. See? He wants to face me. The fool thinks this is about honor or justice. And if it's another diversion, Reed asked, what if his real target is elsewhere? That's why you're staying here with Alderman, Dalton decided. Make sure he doesn't try to cut a deal before I get back. Reed's expression showed his relief at not having to face Elijah again. Yes, sir. The old training facility sat dark and silent against the night sky. Once a source of pride for the Oak Ridge Police Department, it had fallen into disrepair. Crumbling buildings, overgrown training courses, and a main structure that had once housed classrooms and shooting ranges. Dalton's convoy approached cautiously, headlights cutting through the darkness. The mercenaries deployed in tactical formation, surrounding the facility while Dalton remained in the command vehicle, directing operations. Alpha Team, take the east entrance. Bravo, west side. Charlie, cover the perimeter. No one gets out, he ordered through the radio. The teams acknowledged and moved into position. Movement inside, the Alpha leader reported. Single figure, central building. Proceed with caution, Dalton instructed. Remember, he's ex-military, trained in guerrilla tactics. The mercenaries advanced, weapons ready. As they breached the main building, the facility's old emergency lighting suddenly flickered to life, casting long shadows through the corridors. Sir, something's wrong, Alpha leader reported. The building's rigged. I'm seeing tripwires, pressure, plates. Bomb squad training center, Dalton realized aloud. Cross is using the old training devices. Before the team could retreat, the first explosion rocked the eastern wing of the building. Not lethal, designed to stun rather than kill, but effective at creating chaos. Through the radio came shouts of confusion as smoke filled the corridors. More controlled detonations followed, herding the mercenaries into crossfire positions where they couldn't distinguish friend from foe in the haze. Fall back, Dalton ordered. "Everyone out now!" But the mercenaries were professional enough to recognize when they were being manipulated. Instead of panicking, they regrouped, adapting to Cross's tactics. "He's trying to thin our numbers," the mercenary commander told Dalton. "Make us fight each other." "Then we change the game," Dalton decided. He grabbed a tactical vest and his shotgun. "I'm going in." "Sir, that's exactly what he wants." "I know, but I've got 20 armed men with me and he's alone." Dalton checked his weapon. "Even Elijah Cross can't fight those odds." Inside the facility, Elijah moved silently through the shadows, watching. Dalton's men threw thermal imaging goggles. Every step they took, every position they assumed, all played into his plan. Maya's voice came through his earpiece. "National Guard is 30 minutes out. FBI has Alderman in custody. They're looking for Dalton." "He's here," Elijah replied softly. "Just entered the building with a security detail." "Elijah," Maya's voice was concerned. "Don't forget why we're doing this. Evidence, exposure, justice. Not revenge." "I haven't forgotten," Elijah assured her, though the cold determination in his voice suggested otherwise. He moved to the facility's central area, once a classroom, now stripped bare except for a single chair in the center, illuminated by the only working overhead light. Beside it sat a digital camera on a tripod. Taking position in the shadows just outside the light's reach, Elijah waited. Minutes later, footsteps approached, multiple sets, trying to move quietly but betrayed by the building's acoustics. Dalton entered first, shotgun leading, flanked by 4 mercenaries. "Cross," Dalton called out. "Show yourself." "Send your men away, Sheriff," Elijah's voice echoed from the shadows. "This is between us." "Like hell it is," Dalton snarled. "You've terrorized my town, destroyed private property, interfered with police operations. You're a criminal, nothing more." "Your town?" Elijah emerged partially into the light, staying in a defensive position. "You mean the town you've been poisoning with drugs? The one where you murder innocent teachers who get in your way?" "Angela was an accident," Dalton insisted, though his eyes shifted nervously. "The dashcam footage says otherwise. So does Morris's confession. And now Martin Alderman's." This caught Dalton off guard. "What are you talking about?" "Check your phone," Elijah suggested. Dalton hesitated, then pulled out his phone. On the screen was a video message. Martin Alderman, face bruised, confessing everything. The corruption, the drug operation, the order to intimidate Angela Cross that led to her murder. It's already been sent to the FBI, the state police, and every news outlet in the region, Elijah informed him. "It's over, Dalton." The sheriff's face contorted with rage. "Kill him," he ordered the mercenaries. But the hired guns didn't move. "They're professionals," Elijah explained. "They know a losing proposition when they see one, and they've just received proof that their employer is a murderer and drug trafficker. Bad for their reputation." The mercenary leader lowered his weapon. "He's right. We're out, Sheriff. Find your own way out of this mess." He signaled his men, and they backed away, leaving Dalton alone. "Cowards!" Dalton shouted after them. "No," Elijah countered. "Practical. Unlike you, they know when they're beaten." Dalton turned back to Elijah, his shotgun still raised. "I'm not beaten yet." He fired, the blast deafening in the enclosed space. But Elijah had anticipated the move, dropping and rolling as the shot scattered harmlessly above him. Before Dalton could pump another round, Elijah closed the distance between them, disarming the sheriff with a precise strike to his wrist. The shotgun clattered to the floor as Elijah drove Dalton backward, the 2 men crashing into the wall. Dalton was larger, heavier, but Elijah moved with the efficiency of someone trained to eliminate threats quickly. Dalton fought back with desperate strength, landing a solid punch to Elijah's ribs. "You think this ends with me?" he gasped, struggling to break Elijah's hold. "There are others, bigger players than Alderman and me. They'll come for you." "Let them," Elijah replied coldly, delivering a strike to Dalton's solar plexus that left the sheriff gasping. As Dalton doubled over, Elijah seized him by the collar and dragged him to the chair in the center of the room. With quick, efficient movements, He secured the sheriff's hands with zip ties. "What are you gonna do?" Dalton wheezed, fear finally breaking through his bravado. "Kill me? Become what you claim to hate?" Elijah stepped back, regarding Dalton with cold detachment. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead already." He walked to the camera and switched it on, the red recording light blinking to life. "No, Sheriff. I want something much worse for you. I want the truth." Understanding dawned on Dalton's face. "I won't confess," he spat. "Yes, you will," Elijah replied with certainty, "because deep down you're a coward. You've spent your life bullying those weaker than you, hiding behind your badge, your connections. But now it's just you and me, and we both know what you really are." Elijah leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Dalton could hear. "Start talking, or I'll show you what I learned in places you can't imagine. There are ways to cause pain that leave no marks, Sheriff. Ways that make men like you beg for mercy." Whether it was the cold certainty in Elijah's eyes or the realization that his empire had crumbled, something in Dalton broke. His shoulders slumped, and he began to speak, his confession captured in high definition as the camera recorded every damning word. Outside the training facility, FBI vehicles arrived, followed by state police cruisers. Agent Rachel Vaughn, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, took command of the situation, ordering a perimeter established around the building. "We have confirmation that Sheriff Dalton is inside," she told her team. "Possibly armed, definitely dangerous. Approach with caution." As they prepared to breach, the main doors of the facility swung open. Elijah Cross emerged, hands raised to show he was unarmed. Behind him, stumbling and disoriented, came Sheriff Dalton, his hands zip-tied in front of him. "FBI," Vaughn called. Out, her weapon trained on Elijah. "Freeze! Both of you on the ground now." Elijah complied immediately, kneeling and placing his hands behind his head. Dalton, defeated and broken, simply collapsed to his knees. As agents rushed forward to secure both men, Elijah spoke clearly. "Agent Vaughn, inside you'll find a full video confession from Sheriff Dalton, detailing his criminal enterprise and the murder of Angela Cross." Vaughn kept her weapon steady. "We'll sort that out at headquarters, Mr. Cross. Right now, you're both under arrest." "Of course," Elijah replied calmly. "Justice needs to be seen, to be done." As agents handcuffed him, Elijah caught Dalton's eye one last time. The sheriff looked away, unable to meet the gaze of the man who had systematically destroyed everything he had built. The night sky above Oak Ridge was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. As Elijah was led to a waiting FBI vehicle, he glanced toward the horizon, toward the promise of a new day, one without Dalton's corruption poisoning the town Angela had loved so much. It wasn't a happy ending. Angela was still gone. But perhaps, Elijah thought as the vehicle doors closed around him, it was a beginning. A chance for healing, for rebuilding, for justice. The Oak Ridge County Courthouse hadn't seen this much activity in decades. News vans lined the street outside, reporters jostling for position as the most sensational trial in the town's history entered its third week. Inside, the gallery was packed with citizens, many wearing blue ribbons, Angela's favorite color, as a silent show of support for Elijah Cross. In the 6 weeks since the showdown at the training facility, Oak Ridge had transformed. Sheriff Dalton's arrest had triggered investigations that reached far beyond the town limits. 17 officers had been indicted. Martin Alderman's business empire was being dismantled by federal prosecutors. Politicians who had accepted bribes were resigning in disgrace. Elijah sat at the defense table, wearing a suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. Prison food and the stress of the trial had taken their toll, but his posture remained military straight, his gaze steady. Beside him, his attorney Sarah Foster, the same public defender who had visited him in jail, organized her notes for the day's proceedings. "The prosecution is calling Agent Vaughn today," Foster whispered. "She's their last witness before closing arguments." Elijah nodded, his expression revealing nothing. From his position, he could see several familiar faces in the gallery. Marcus, from the community center, Hawk sitting vigilantly at the back, and Maya Chen, who had somehow avoided prosecution despite her role as cipher. The FBI had been more interested in the evidence she'd gathered against Dalton and Alderman than in pursuing charges against her. The side door opened, and the bailiff escorted in the day's main attraction, Sheriff Bill Dalton, now wearing prison orange instead of his uniform. The former sheriff's face was ashen, his once imposing physique diminished by confinement. He avoided eye contact with anyone as guards led him to the witness stand. District Attorney Richard Powell approached Dalton with confident strides. At 55, Powell had built his career prosecuting minor drug offenses and petty crimes, never touching the major players in town. Now, with federal oversight watching his every move, he was determined to show he wasn't complicit in the corruption. "Sheriff Dalton," Powell began, "you've entered a guilty plea to charges of corruption, drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Is that correct?" "Yes," Dalton replied, his voice barely audible. "And as part of your plea agreement, you've agreed to testify regarding the actions of the defendant, Elijah Cross, during the period following his wife's death. Is that also correct?" "It is." Powell paced before the witness stand. "In your own words, describe the defendant's campaign against you and your department." Dalton cleared his throat. "Cross systematically targeted my officers, my operations. He destroyed property, assaulted police personnel, interfered with legitimate law enforcement activities." "And was there ever any legitimate threat to the public? Safety from his actions?" "Absolutely," Dalton responded, finding his voice. "He used explosives in populated areas. He interrogated and threatened officers. He created public panic." Powell nodded approvingly. "Would you characterize his actions as those of a vigilante pursuing a personal vendetta rather than justice?" Elijah's attorney stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation." "Sustained," Judge Helen Barnes ruled. "Rephrase, Counselor." Powell adjusted smoothly. "In your expert opinion as a law enforcement officer, did Mr. Cross's actions fall outside legal methods of seeking justice?" "They did," Dalton confirmed. "He took the law into his own hands." Powell returned to his table. No further questions. Sarah Foster approached the stand, her expression calm but determined. "Sheriff Dalton, you testified that Mr. Cross targeted your operations. Would you clarify what operations those were?" Dalton shifted uncomfortably. "My department's normal activities. Normal activities like drug trafficking, money laundering, the murder of innocent citizens." Foster's voice remained even, but her words cut like knives. "Objection," Powell called out. "Argumentative." "Withdrawn," Foster replied before the judge. "Could rule." "Sheriff Dalton, did you order the traffic stop that led to Angela Cross's death?" Dalton hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." "Was there any legitimate reason for that stop?" "No." "Was Angela Cross armed or dangerous in any way?" "No." "Did she commit any crime whatsoever?" "No." Foster let the admissions hang in the air for a moment. "When Mr. Cross escaped custody, did you follow proper procedures to apprehend him?" "We activated standard protocols." "Did those protocols include hiring private mercenaries, declaring martial law without proper authorization, attempting to assassinate Mr. Cross rather than arrest him?" Dalton's face darkened. "We took necessary measures against a dangerous fugitive." "A fugitive who was only seeking evidence of your crimes," Foster countered. "Evidence that you and your department actively concealed and destroyed. Evidence that would have exonerated him." "Objection," Powell interjected. "Counsel is testifying." "Sustained," Judge Barnes agreed. "Ms. Foster, please confine yourself to questions." Foster nodded. "Sheriff Dalton, did you ever offer Mr. Cross an opportunity to present his evidence? Through official channels?" "He never tried to use official channels," Dalton replied. "Really?" Foster approached the defense table and retrieved a file. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit 42, a formal complaint filed by Elijah Cross with the state police and FBI 3 days after his wife's murder, detailing the corruption in your department and the circumstances of Angela Cross's Death. She handed the document to Dalton. Do you recognize this? Dalton scanned the paper, his expression souring. Yes. And what happened to this complaint? It was not processed. Not processed, Foster repeated, because you personally contacted your allies in both agencies to ensure it disappeared. Correct? Dalton's silence was answer enough. Foster turned to face the jury. One final question, Sheriff. Given that you controlled the police, the evidence, had allies in state and federal agencies, and were prepared to murder to protect your criminal enterprise, what legal recourse did Mr. Cross actually have to obtain justice for his wife's murder? Powell shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Speculative and argumentative. Your Honor, Foster countered. The prosecution's entire case rests on the claim that Mr. Cross had legal alternatives he chose to ignore. This question goes to the heart of his defense of necessity. Judge Barnes considered, then nodded. I'll allow it. The witness will answer. All eyes turned to Dalton, who looked trapped. After a long moment, he muttered, I don't know. You don't? No, Foster echoed. Because there wasn't one. No further questions. As Dalton was led from the courtroom, the gallery buzzed with whispers. Elijah remained focused, showing no reaction. The next witness was FBI agent Rachel Vaughn. Unlike Dalton, she walked to the stand with confidence, her FBI credentials prominently displayed on her blazer. Powell approached her cautiously. This witness was a double-edged sword. Her testimony could help convict Elijah for his vigilante actions, but she was also responsible for exposing the corruption that had made those actions necessary. Agent Vaughn, please describe for the court your involvement in this case. I was assigned to investigate allegations of corruption in the Oak Ridge Police Department following the viral spread of dashcam footage showing Angela Cross's shooting, Vaughn testified. Initially, I encountered significant resistance from Sheriff Dalton and local officials. When Mr. Cross began his campaign against the department, I was tasked with apprehending him. And you ultimately arrested Mr. Cross at the police training facility, correct? Yes. He surrendered without resistance and provided us with Sheriff Dalton's videotaped confession. Powell nodded. In your professional assessment, were Mr. Cross's actions those of a man seeking justice through proper channels, or those of a vigilante? Vaughn paused, considering her answer carefully. Mr. Cross employed methods that fall outside the boundaries of legal justice seeking, she said finally. However, it's also true that the normal channels of justice in Oak Ridge had been compromised. Powell frowned slightly at the qualification. But he broke numerous laws in his pursuit of Sheriff Dalton, did he not? He did, Vaughn confirmed, though it's worth noting that without his actions, we would not have uncovered the full extent of the corruption in Oak Ridge. Powell quickly ended his questioning, and Foster approached for cross-examination. Agent Vaughn, when you first arrived in Oak Ridge, were you aware of the level of corruption in the local government? No, Vaughn admitted. The extent of it only became clear as our investigation progressed. And did you encounter obstacles in your investigation? Yes. Files disappeared, witnesses changed their statements, evidence was tampered with. My own superiors seemed reluctant to pursue certain leads. Foster nodded. In fact, didn't you file a formal complaint about interference in your investigation? I did, Vaughn confirmed. Agent Vaughn, in your professional opinion, would the Oak Ridge corruption network have been exposed without Elijah Cross's intervention? Vaughn's gaze shifted to Elijah briefly. Based on what we now know about the depth and reach of the corruption, and how many previous investigations were derailed, no, I don't believe it would have been exposed through normal channels. And has Mr. Cross been cooperative with authorities since his arrest? Extremely. The evidence he gathered has been instrumental in building cases against dozens of corrupt officials. Thank you, Agent Vaughn, Foster concluded. No further questions. Judge Barnes called a recess before closing arguments. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Elijah stood with Foster reviewing strategy. The jury is sympathetic, Foster told him. Many of them have lived under Dalton's corruption for years, but the legal bar for necessity as a defense is high. What are my chances? Elijah asked. Foster sighed. Honestly, 50-50. Your actions saved this town, but you broke a lot of laws doing it. Marcus approached them, looking older than his 17 years. Mr. Cross, he said hesitantly, everyone at the community center wanted me to tell you. We're all behind you. Elijah placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Thank you, Marcus. Keep the programs running, no matter what happens. We will, Marcus promised. We're not giving up. What you and Mrs. Cross built. As Marcus walked away, Hawk approached next. No matter what happens in there, you did right, he said simply. Elijah nodded, grateful for his friend's unwavering support. The bailiff called them back into the courtroom. As closing arguments began, Elijah's mind drifted to Angela. To her, unwavering belief in justice and community, in doing what was right even when it was difficult. He had avenged her death, but had he honored her life? Powell's closing was methodical, acknowledging the corruption Elijah had exposed while emphasizing that vigilantism could not be tolerated in a society of laws. No matter how just his cause, Mr. Cross appointed himself judge, jury, and executioner. He concluded, that is not justice, that is chaos. Foster's closing was passionate. She detailed the systematic corruption that had killed Angela and prevented any legitimate investigation. When the system itself is corrupt, she argued, following the system's rules becomes not just feudal, but complicit. Elijah Cross did what any of us would have done if we had his courage. He sought justice when justice had been buried. As the jury filed out to deliberate, Elijah sat perfectly still, his face a mask of calm. Whatever came next, he had done. What needed to be done? Angela's killers would never hurt anyone again. The deliberation lasted 3 days. When the jury finally returned, the courtroom fell silent. On the charge of assault on law enforcement officers, how do you find? Judge Barnes asked the foreman. We find the defendant guilty, Your Honor. Elijah's expression didn't change. On the charges of destruction of property and illegal weapons possession, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. Foster squeezed Elijah's arm reassuringly. On the most serious charge of vigilantism resulting in bodily harm, how do you find? The foreman hesitated. Not guilty, Your Honor. We find the defense of necessity was met. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Barnes called for order. Elijah Cross, please rise for sentencing. Elijah stood, his back straight, eyes forward. This court has rarely faced such a complex case, Judge Barnes began. Your actions exposed corruption that had poisoned this town for decades. You acted when the normal channels of justice were closed to you. Yet you also took the law into your own hands, and that cannot go unpunished. She paused, studying him. For the charges on which you have been convicted, I sentence you to 3 years probation, with community service to be performed at the Oak Ridge Community Center, continuing the work you began there. Gasps and whispers erupted throughout the courtroom. Powell looked stunned. This court is adjourned, Judge Barnes declared, bringing down her gavel. As the spectators filtered out, Elijah stood motionless, still processing the verdict. Foster was beaming. It's over, she told him. You're free. Free. The word echoed strangely in his mind. Without Angela, without the driving purpose of exposing her killers, what did freedom mean? Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Elijah pushed through them without comment, searching for a moment of quiet to collect his thoughts. In the parking lot, he found Agent Vaughn leaning against her car, waiting. Congratulations, she said simply. Thank you for your testimony, Elijah replied. It made a difference. Vaughn nodded. Your wife would be proud, not just of what you exposed, but that you chose justice over vengeance in the end. As she walked away, Elijah wondered if that was true. Had he really chosen justice over vengeance? Or had they simply aligned in the end? Either way, Angela's killers would face justice. Dalton would spend decades in prison. Alderman's empire was dismantled. The corrupt system that had protected them was exposed. It wasn't enough. Nothing could be with Angela gone. But perhaps it was a start. 6 months after the trial, Oak Ridge was slowly healing. The police department had been restructured under state oversight, with new leadership committed to transparency. Businesses once controlled by aldermen were under new ownership. The east side of town, long neglected, was receiving long overdue investment in infrastructure and community services. Elijah stood before Angela's grave, a single white rose in hand. The headstone was simple marble, engraved with her name and the dates of her birth and death. Beneath was inscribed, "Teacher, mentor, beloved wife, her light continues." "It's over," Elijah said softly, placing the rose against the stone. Dalton was sentenced to 30 years. Alderman got 25. The others are pleading out, turning on each other. He paused, struggling with the lump in his throat. They can't hurt anyone else now. The autumn breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Elijah had visited every week since the trial, finding a strange comfort in these one-sided conversations. The community center is thriving. Marcus is helping run the mentoring program. He's good with the younger kids. A sad smile crossed his face. He reminds me of you sometimes, sees the best in people. Footsteps crunched on gravel behind him. Elijah didn't turn, recognizing the careful, respectful pace. "Mr. Cross?" Marcus's voice was hesitant, not wanting to intrude. "It's okay, Marcus," Elijah said, turning to face the teenager. In the month since Angela's death, Marcus had grown taller, more confident, stepping into leadership roles at the community center. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Marcus said. "Just wanted to pay my respects." Elijah stepped aside, allowing Marcus to approach the grave. The boy placed a small, handmade card beside Elijah's rose. "The kids in my tutoring group made it," Marcus explained. "They wanted Mrs. Cross to know they're keeping up their grades." Elijah felt a tightness in his chest that was both pain and gratitude. "She'd be proud of you. Of all of you." They stood in silence for a moment, united in remembrance. "You taught me that violence isn't the answer," Marcus said finally. "That discipline and focus are better weapons than anger." Elijah winced slightly. After everything that had happened, those lessons seemed hollow. "I failed to live up to those teachings." "Did you?" Marcus challenged gently. "You could have killed them all. Dalton, Reed, the officers who shot Mrs. Cross. You had the skills. But you chose a different path." "Not at first," Elijah admitted. "At first I wanted blood. But in the end you chose justice," Marcus insisted. "That's what matters, that's what she would have wanted." Elijah wasn't so sure, but he appreciated the boy's perspective. "We should get back to the center. The self-defense class starts in 30 minutes. As they walked to Elijah's car, Marcus hesitated. "There's something else. Someone came by the center looking for you. Said her name was Cypher." Elijah stopped. "Maya? What did she want?" "Wouldn't say. Just left an envelope and said it was important." At the community center, the sealed envelope waited on Elijah's desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an IP address, a time, and the words, "We're not finished." At the appointed time, Elijah logged into the secure video chat from his office. "Computer." Maya's face appeared on the screen, her expression serious. "I thought you'd disappeared for good," Elijah said by way of greeting. "I'm good at disappearing," Maya replied. "And at finding things others want to stay hidden." "Like what?" "Remember when Dalton said there were bigger players?" He wasn't lying. She began sharing documents on the screen, financial records, surveillance, photos, transcripts of conversations. Alderman and Dalton were just middle management in a much larger organization. Elijah studied the information with growing concern. These connections go to state level. Federal. Exactly. The corruption in Oak Ridge was just one node in a network that spans multiple states. Drug distribution, human trafficking, political manipulation. Maya's expression was grim. "What we exposed in Oak Ridge was just the tip of the iceberg." "Why show me this?" Elijah asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Because there are other Angelas out there. Other victims. Other towns suffering, under the same corruption." Maya leaned closer to the camera. "I'm not asking you to become a vigilante again. I'm asking you to help me expose the truth, legally this time." I have connections in federal law enforcement who aren't compromised, journalists who can't be bought. Elijah was silent for a long moment. The thought of diving back into darkness after finally finding some measure of peace was daunting. Yet, the idea that Angela's death was part of something even larger, that others were suffering the same injustice. "I need to think about this," he said finally. Maya nodded. "Take your time, but not too much. They're already working to rebuild what we destroyed in Oak Ridge." After the call ended, Elijah sat in the quiet of his office, surrounded by photos of community events, certificates of achievement from the mentoring programs, reminders of the positive work he and Angela had built together. A knock at the door broke his reverie. It was Sarah Foster, his attorney from the trial, now a regular volunteer at the center. "You look troubled," she observed, taking a seat across from him. "Just thinking about the past and the future." Sarah studied him. "You've done amazing work here these past months. The center is helping more kids than ever. But is it enough?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "Enough for what?" Sarah asked. Elijah gestured vaguely. "To make a difference, to change things." "You have changed things," Sarah insisted. "This whole town is different because of you and Angela. And what about other towns? Other places where corruption ruins lives, where justice is just a word?" Sarah's expression softened with understanding. "You're thinking of going back to fighting the good fight." "I don't know," Elijah admitted. "Part of me wants to stay here, continue what Angela and I started. Another part feels like there's more to be done." "Maybe it's not either or," Sarah suggested. "This center, these programs, they're making a real difference in people's lives. That's Angela's legacy, but that doesn't mean you can't also work for justice on a larger scale." Elijah considered her words. "I promised myself I'd never go back to that life. The violence, the darkness." "Then don't," Sarah said simply. "Find another way. Use what you've learned. Work with the system instead of against it." Later that evening, Elijah returned home to the house he had shared with Angela. For months after her death, he couldn't bear to enter it. Now, he was slowly reclaiming the space, though her absence still echoed in every room. In their bedroom, he opened the small wooden box where he kept mementos of their life together. Photos, ticket stubs, the little notes she would leave in his lunch. At the bottom was a letter Angela had written him years ago, when he was struggling with his transition from military to civilian life. He unfolded it carefully, reading her familiar handwriting. "The fight for justice never ends, but love will always be our greatest weapon. You carried darkness for our country. Now carry light for our community. That's your true strength. Not your ability to harm, but your capacity to heal." Elijah closed his eyes, feeling her presence in the words. Angela had always seen beyond the immediate battle to the larger war. Not against people, but against injustice itself. The next morning, Elijah met Maya at a small cafe outside of town. "I'll help," he told her without preamble. "But on my terms, no violence, no vigilantism. We do this the right way." Maya studied him, then nodded. "The right way it is. What's your plan?" "First, we build a coalition. Law enforcement we can trust, journalists, community leaders, former victims, create a network of our own to counter theirs. And then we shine a light so bright they have nowhere to hide." Elijah's expression was resolute. Angela believed in the power of truth, of community, of standing together against injustice. That's how we honor her, not through vengeance, but through lasting change. As they outlined their strategy, Elijah felt a sense of purpose that had been missing since the trial. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building something better from the ashes of corruption, something Angela would have been proud of. That evening, Elijah visited the community center one last time before his journey would take him away temporarily. The building hummed with activity, children laughing in classrooms, teenagers engaged in debate, adults learning new skills. Marcus found him watching from the doorway of the main hall. You're leaving, aren't you? The boy asked perceptively. For a while, Elijah confirmed. There's work to be done elsewhere, but I'll be back. We'll keep things running here, Marcus promised, just like Mrs. Cross would want. I know you will. Elijah placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. This place, what happens here? It matters. Even when it seems like the problems out there are too big, changing one life at a time still matters. As the sun set over Oak Ridge, Elijah stood on the wide steps of the community center, watching the golden light bathe the town. So much had changed in the year since Angela's death, the corruption exposed, justice served, community rebuilt. Yet the work was far from over. Perhaps it never would be. Elijah thought of Angela's words again. The fight for justice never ends, but love will always be our greatest weapon. With that truth in his heart, Elijah Cross stepped forward into the fading light, ready to carry on. What would you be willing to sacrifice for justice in a world where the system itself is corrupt? Elijah Cross's journey from vengeance to redemption reminds us that true strength lies not in our capacity for violence, but in our commitment to what's right. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to support more powerful narratives of justice and redemption.